The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the executive boardroom as Jack's mop moved rhythmically across the marble floor. He kept his eyes down, invisible by design in his gray uniform that blended with the walls. The air suddenly electrified as CEO Sarah Morgan slammed her portfolio onto the mahogany table, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. $5 million. Gone. Stolen right from under our noses, she announced. Her knuckles white against the leather chair. The board members shifted uncomfortably as security footage appeared on the wall screen. The breach originated from a terminal in the server room at exactly 3:15 a.m. Director Ryan Mitchell's finger jabbed accusingly toward Jack. When HE was the only person with access. 20 heads swiveled toward the janitor, faces contorting with disgust and suspicion. I always said we shouldn't allow maintenance staff unsupervised access to sensitive areas, someone muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. 2 security guards materialized at Jack's side, roughly grabbing his mop. Employee badge. Now, one demanded, extending his palm as if afraid to touch Jack directly. The room watched with collective contempt as the janitor, this nobody, this intruder in their pristine world of power, was stripped of his dignity. As they seized his arm to escort him out, Jack straightened his shoulders, looking directly at Sarah for perhaps the first time. "Give me 24 hours, he said, his voice unexpectedly steady. "I'll find your real thief." Ryan's laughter echoed through the room. "The janitor thinks he's a detective now." Classic. 6 months earlier, dawnlight filtered through thin curtains in Jack's modest suburban apartment. The sound of eggs sizzling in the pan accompanied his gentle humming as he prepared breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Their morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance breakfast together, Jack braiding Lily's hair while she practiced multiplication tables, then a quick walk to the school bus stop before he caught the early bus to WonderTech. His daughter's backpack always seemed too large for her small frame, emblazoned with planets and rocket ships that hinted at her fascination with science and technology. Jack watched her board the yellow bus, waving until it disappeared around the corner, before his smile faded into the weary expression he wore the rest of the day. The weight of single parenthood pressed down on his shoulders, but he carried it without complaint, treasuring these morning moments that anchored his purpose. The gleaming WonderTech headquarters stood in stark contrast to Jack's home, all glass and steel rising 20 stories into the sky, housing some of the most brilliant tech minds in the country. Jack had once been among them, his code helping to build the security infrastructure of several major corporations. Now he pushed his cleaning cart through hallways where former colleagues passed without recognition, their conversations about code optimization and system architecture washing over him like familiar music. He had become invisible, a ghost in the building he once helped secure. His routine never varied: start with the executive floor before the suits arrived, then methodically work his way down, floor by floor, listening and observing more than anyone realized. The janitorial uniform had become his camouflage, allowing him to move through spaces unnoticed, hearing snippets of meetings and seeing documents left carelessly exposed on desks. Sarah Morgan had taken over as CEO 3 months ago, the youngest woman ever to lead WonderTech, and already making waves with her aggressive growth strategies. Jack first encountered her one morning at 5:30, when she strode into her office while he was emptying trash bins. She nearly collided with him, coffee sloshing over the rim of her cup. "Oh, I didn't realize anyone would be here," she'd said, genuinely startled to find another person at this hour. Her eyes had barely registered him before returning to her phone. Jack nodded politely and continued his work, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way her shoulders carried the invisible weight of her position. She didn't notice that he was the same man who cleaned her office every day, who witnessed her late nights through the glass walls, who saw her staring out at the city lights when everyone else had gone home. To her, he was just another service worker, as functionally invisible as the furniture. One morning, as Jack wiped down the conference table after a late-night strategy session, he noticed a crumpled piece of paper beneath a chair. Instinctively, he smoothed it out before discarding it, but the technical jargon caught his eye. Notes about a potential security vulnerability in the company's new financial processing system. Jack recognized the seriousness immediately. This was exactly the kind of exploit he used to hunt down in his previous life. His first instinct was to alert someone, but then reality crashed down. Who would believe the janitor had enough technical knowledge to understand the problem? Worse, he might be accused of snooping through confidential documents. Jack carefully folded the paper and placed it in the recycling bin, but the information stayed with him, an itch he couldn't scratch. That night, he sketched out the vulnerability from memory, his technical mind automatically cataloging potential attack vectors and countermeasures. At home that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep clutching her dog-eared coding book, Jack sat in the dim light of their small living room, surrounded by framed photos of his late wife, Emma. 3 years had passed since cancer took her, but her absence still felt like a fresh wound. He traced her smile in one photo, remembering how she'd encouraged him to maintain his skills even after he left the industry to care for Lily. "Your mind is too valuable to waste," she'd insisted during her final months. Jack opened his old laptop, its casing cracked and keyboard worn, and began reading tech forums, silently keeping his knowledge current while the rest of the world slept. In these quiet hours, he was still the security architect, still the man whose innovations had once been celebrated in the industry, before life forced him to choose between career ambition and being the father his daughter needed. 2 weeks before the breach, Jack noticed something unusual while cleaning the server room. The monitoring screens, normally displaying steady green status indicators, showed intermittent red flashes error messages that disappeared too quickly to read. As a janitor, he had no business paying attention to such things, but old habits died hard. The next night, he lingered longer, wiping the same section of floor repeatedly until he could confirm what he'd seen: unauthorized access attempts being logged and then immediately erased from the system. This pattern triggered alarm bells in his mind, reminiscent of attack strategies he'd studied years ago. Jack tried reporting his concerns to night security, but was met with dismissive laughter. "Stick to your mop, buddy. Leave the computers to the experts," the guard had said, not unkindly, but with the casual disregard reserved for those deemed irrelevant. The interaction reinforced what Jack already knew in this version of his life: his knowledge and experience didn't matter. His warnings went unheeded simply because of the uniform he wore. The following week brought increasing pressure as Sarah began noticing discrepancies in financial reports. The executive floor buzzed with tension, meetings running later into the evening. Jack overheard fragments of concerned conversations as he emptied bins and replaced trash liners. IT Director Ryan Mitchell's voice often rose above others, assuring everyone that his team had found nothing suspicious. "The system is secure. These are accounting errors, not security breaches," he insisted repeatedly, though Jack noted the uncertainty beneath his confident tone. Meanwhile, Sarah looked increasingly haggard, the weight of potential disaster visible in her tightening expression and clipped responses. Jack observed it all silently, collecting pieces of a puzzle that others didn't even realize was forming. His trained eye recognized the classic signs of a sophisticated internal breach, not from outside hackers, but from someone with intimate knowledge of the system. When Lily developed a high fever one Tuesday, Jack had no choice but to call in for emergency time off. His supervisor's irritation came through clearly over the phone. "This is the third time this quarter, Harris. We have schedules for a reason. One more absence, and we'll need to reconsider your position." The threat hung in the air as Jack sat in the pediatrician's waiting room, Lily's hot forehead pressed against his shoulder. Her health mattered more than any job, but the precariousness of their situation wasn't lost on him. Without his income, they would lose their apartment within months. As Lily dozed on antibiotics that evening, Jack updated his resume in the dark, a ritual of preparedness that had become second nature. His qualifications were impressive, but the 3-year employment gap and his current janitorial position meant most technical recruiters discarded his applications without a second glance. He had become defined by his current role, his past expertise rendered invisible by present circumstances. The rain fell in heavy sheets the following Friday as Jack and Lily stood at the bus stop, sharing his threadbare umbrella. The company car that slowed beside them was unexpected, the sleek black vehicle with tinted windows that everyone recognized as the CEO's transportation. The window lowered to reveal Sarah's surprised face. "You're getting soaked. Can I offer you a ride?" she asked, seeming genuinely concerned rather than merely polite. Jack hesitated, but Lily's sniffles made the decision for him. In the warm interior of the luxury sedan, Lily's natural curiosity overcame her shyness as she pulled out her coding book. Sarah's eyebrows raised in genuine surprise. "You're reading about Python? That's impressive for someone your age." Jack explained quietly that he taught Lily basics of programming on weekends. "My dad used to build super secure computer systems," Lily announced proudly, oblivious to her father's uncomfortable shift in his seat. Sarah's gaze lingered on Jack with new interest, reassessing the silent man who cleaned her office. For the first time, she looked at him, and the disparity between his job and his daughter's statement registered as a curiosity worth exploring. During the drive, Sarah noticed how Jack pointed out logical patterns in street layouts to Lily, turning even a simple car ride into a learning opportunity. His explanations were clear, precise, revealing a mind that thought systematically. When they arrived at Jack's apartment building, far more modest than Sarah had expected, Lily thanked her with unexpected poise, while Jack offered a quiet, dignified appreciation that carried none of the obsequiousness Sarah was accustomed to from employees of his rank. As the car pulled away, Sarah found herself wondering about the janitor who taught his daughter coding and spoke with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable with complex systems. The incongruity lingered in her mind, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit with her assumptions. The morning of the breach announcement, chaos erupted throughout WonderTech. Jack watched from the periphery as security teams rushed between floors, executives huddled in panicked groups, and rumors spread like wildfire. The emergency board meeting was called for 9 o'clock. Jack was midway through mopping the executive floor when the accusation landed. The evidence seemed damning. Access logs showed his badge had been used to enter the server room at 3 in the morning, during hours he wasn't scheduled. What the logs didn't show was that he'd lost his badge 2 days earlier and reported it missing. In the rush of the crisis, no one had bothered to check. As security escorted him from the building, Jack's thoughts weren't on his own predicament but on Lily, waiting at after-school care with no idea her father might not arrive to pick her up. The humiliation of being marched through the open office burned, but Jack maintained his dignity, back straight and eyes forward. Employees stared openly, whispering behind cupped hands, suddenly seeing the invisible man who had emptied their trash for months. Their stares held judgment, confirmation of biases already formed about people who cleaned their spaces. For them, it made perfect sense that the janitor would be the criminal. Who else but the lowest-ranking employee would resort to theft? The simplistic narrative satisfied their worldview, requiring no further investigation. Only a handful looked uncomfortable with the spectacle, and none spoke up in his defense. The lesson wasn't lost on Jack. In their world, he was dispensable, guilty by position, rather than evidence. Instead of leaving the premises, Jack found a forgotten maintenance alcove near a back stairwell. He pulled out his personal laptop, connecting to a public Wi-Fi network, rather than the company's system. For hours, he meticulously reviewed his notes on the server anomalies, cross-referencing them with publicly available information about recent cyber attacks. The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't an external breach, but an inside job designed to look external. Someone with intimate knowledge of WonderTech's security protocols had been systematically siphoning funds while creating a trail that would implicate someone else. Jack was so absorbed in his analysis that he didn't hear the footsteps until a shadow fell across his screen. Sarah stood there, security keycard in hand, momentarily frozen between calling for guards and curiosity about what this supposed janitor was doing. "You should have left the building," she said, her voice even. Jack didn't stop typing but nodded toward his screen. "I'm finding your thief. Look at these access patterns. They're too precise, too knowledgeable. This isn't some random employee stumbling into restricted areas. This is someone who knows exactly how your security system works." Despite herself, Sarah leaned closer, her business attire incongruous in the dusty maintenance area. Jack explained in clear, jargon-free language how the attack had been executed, pointing out timestamps and patterns that revealed a methodical approach, spanning months, not days. His explanation held none of the condescension she'd grown accustomed to from her technical team. Instead, he translated complex concepts into analogies she could immediately grasp, showing respect for her intelligence without insulting her technical knowledge. As reluctant understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes, Jack's phone buzzed with a message from Lily's after-school program asking where he was. The naked concern that flashed across his face seemed to make Sarah's decision for her. "I'll have my driver pick up your daughter and bring her here," she offered, already texting instructions. "Meanwhile, I want you to show this to our security team, not Mitchell's people, but our independent auditors." She led him through back hallways to avoid detection, her heels clicking purposefully on the polished floors where he usually pushed his mop. In a small conference room, away from the main crisis center, Jack laid out his evidence for two skeptical security specialists who gradually shifted from dismissive to alarmed as his explanation continued. Their initial contempt barely concealed eye rolls, and patronizing simplifications gave way to genuine engagement as Jack demonstrated depth of knowledge that surpassed their own, using terminology and referencing protocols that only seasoned security professionals would recognize. When Lily arrived an hour later, escorted by Sarah's personal assistant, her face lit up at the unexpected adventure of visiting her father's workplace. As she settled with her homework and a juice box provided by the increasingly impressed security team, she casually mentioned, "Is Mr. Ryan here too? He comes to our apartment sometimes to play video games with Dad. He said they used to work together, but now it's a secret." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Jack, who closed his eyes briefly before explaining that Ryan Mitchell, the IT director currently leading the breach investigation, had been a former colleague who had recently begun reconnecting, showing unusual interest in Jack's current position at WonderTech. This revelation cast Ryan's insistence on Jack's guilt in an entirely new light, not as professional assessment but as deliberate misdirection. "He reached out about 6 months ago, said he recognized me from an industry conference years back," Jack explained, the pieces falling into place even as he spoke. He's been asking a lot of questions about my access level, my cleaning schedule, especially around the server rooms. Sarah's expression hardened as she immediately ordered a deeper background check on Ryan and a review of all security footage showing his interactions with the server systems. The independent security team began comparing timestamps of suspicious activity with Ryan's badge access, revealing a pattern that had been cleverly obscured by technical misdirection, the kind only someone with intimate knowledge of the system could execute. Through the night, the investigation shifted focus, uncovering the elaborate scheme Ryan had constructed. Camera footage revealed Ryan using a cloned copy of Jack's badge to access restricted areas. Financial trails showed money moving through shell companies connected to offshore accounts in Ryan's name. By dawn, the picture was complete. The IT director had orchestrated the entire breach, planning to frame the anonymous janitor as the perfect scapegoat while he disappeared with the funds. The morning brought police officers to WonderTech, and employees watched in shock as Ryan was escorted from the building in handcuffs, his face a mask of cold fury as he passed Jack standing quietly beside Sarah. The same staff who had whispered about Jack's guilt now stared in disbelief, confronted with their rush to judgment and the ease with which they'd accepted the janitor's culpability. As Ryan was led away, he turned to Jack with unexpected venom. "You were supposed to stay invisible, Harris. That was your job, to clean up messes, not make them." His words revealed more than he intended, that Jack's invisibility had been not just assumed but relied upon. That his perceived insignificance had been a calculated factor in Ryan's plan. The security team discovered that Ryan had specifically requested Jack be assigned to the IT floor cleaning rotation, positioning him as the perfect fall guy, someone with access but no credibility, whose protests would be dismissed by virtue of his position at the bottom of the corporate hierarchy. Ryan had weaponized the very invisibility that the company culture had created around service workers like Jack. The following day, the executive boardroom filled once again, this time with the entire board of directors and key staff assembled to hear Jack explain the breach and how he had uncovered it. Gone was the cleaning uniform, replaced by a simple button-down shirt and slacks that somehow made him look both more substantial and more approachable. Sarah introduced him not as a janitor, but as the security expert who saved this company from disaster. Jack spoke with quiet authority, translating complex technical concepts into accessible explanations that everyone could follow. Think of it like someone copying your house key, but also knowing exactly which floorboard creaks and which window doesn't lock properly, he explained, earning understanding nods from even the least tech-savvy board members. The same executives who had barely looked at him while he cleaned their spaces now leaned forward, hanging on his every word, their perception irreversibly altered by the context shift. When questions turned to his background, Jack reluctantly shared his history's former position as a senior security architect at a major firm, his wife's illness that had forced him to step away from his career, his choice to take a job with predictable hours that allowed him to be present for his daughter after her mother's death. "Sometimes life narrows your choices to what matters most," he said simply, the entire room momentarily hushed by the unadorned truth of his words. Jack explained how the tech industry's demands for 80-hour weeks and constant availability made it impossible to be the parent Lily needed after Emma's death. The janitorial position, with its fixed hours and proximity to home, had been the only viable option that allowed him to be there when his daughter woke from nightmares or needed help with homework. In that silence, Sarah stepped forward, addressing the room with unusual humility. "WonderTech prides itself on recognizing talent and innovation. Yet we had one of the most qualified security experts in the industry mopping our floors, and none of us saw him." Her gaze met Jack's across the room. "I'd like to formally offer Mr. Harris a position as our special advisor on security infrastructure, with flexible hours accommodating his family responsibilities." The offer was more than a job, it was an acknowledgement of the company's blindness, of the talent they had overlooked because it came packaged in a gray uniform rather than a designer suit. It represented a recognition that value exists beyond visible markers of success, that expertise can be found in unexpected places when one bothers to truly see people rather than positions. The applause that followed seemed to embarrass Jack more than the false accusation had. As the meeting dispersed, board members stopped to shake his hand, suddenly eager to speak with the man they'd previously walked past without seeing. Through it all, Lily watched from a chair in the corner, beaming with undisguised pride. "My dad always fixes things," she told anyone who would listen, with the absolute certainty of a child who had never doubted her father's capabilities. Sarah, observing this, felt something shift in her understanding of success and worth, measuring it suddenly not in quarterly reports and stock prices but in the unwavering faith of a small girl in her father. The transition wasn't seamless. Some employees resented Jack's elevation, uncomfortable with the disruption to the hierarchy they understood. Others struggled to reconcile the man who had cleaned their offices with the security expert now leading company-wide briefings. Jack himself had to reacquaint himself with corporate dynamics, navigating office politics he'd been free from during his years of invisibility. He insisted on keeping his first paycheck stub from the janitorial position pinned to his new office wall, a reminder of where he'd been and how quickly fortunes could change. The small frame became a conversation piece, prompting discussions about value, perception, and the masks people wear to survive. 3 months later, autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of Jack's apartment as he flipped pancakes on a Saturday morning. The place looked much the same, still modest, still filled with Emma's photos, but subtle changes revealed their improved circumstances. New books on the shelves, a better laptop on the table, Lily's coding club certificate proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Jack had refused to move to a more upscale neighborhood despite his increased salary, preferring to maintain stability for Lily in the community where she had friends. Instead, he channeled the additional resources into creating opportunities not just for his daughter, but for other children in their working-class neighborhood who had talent but lacked access to technology education. The knock at the door was expected, yet still brought a smile to Jack's face. Sarah stood there, holding a folder that clearly could have waited until Monday. Her casual weekend attire a marked contrast to her workweek persona. "I had some thoughts on the new security protocol that couldn't wait," she claimed unconvincingly, accepting Jack's invitation to join them for breakfast. These Saturday morning visits had become increasingly regular, a gradual blending of professional and personal connections that neither rushed nor defined. Sarah had discovered in Jack something rare, someone who saw her as neither an adversary to overcome nor an authority to please, but simply as a person navigating complex responsibilities just as he was. Around the small kitchen table, the conversation flowed easily, nothing like the strained professional interactions of their first weeks working together. Lily dominated the discussion with excited details about the coding club she and Jack had started for neighborhood kids, describing their plans to teach basic programming skills to children who had no access to such opportunities otherwise. "We use Dad's old laptop and some donated equipment," she explained between bites of syrup-soaked pancake. "Dad says anyone can learn to code if they just get a chance to try." Sarah watched Jack as Lily spoke, noting how his quiet pride in his daughter had begun extending to pride in his work again, his expertise now recognized and valued throughout the company. The bitter experience of being falsely accused had gradually transformed into something unexpected, a platform from which he could implement changes in company culture, ensuring other overlooked employees received recognition for their contributions regardless of title or position. When Lily excused herself to feed her new goldfish a gift from her coding students, Sarah's hand brushed Jack's as they reached simultaneously for the coffee pot. Neither pulled away immediately. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, her professional certainty momentarily replaced by genuine vulnerability. "I've spent so many years focused on climbing higher, moving faster, that I forgot what it's like to just enjoy ordinary moments." She gestured around the sunlit kitchen. "This having breakfast, talking about things that matter, being present, I haven't done this in years." Her admission revealed the paradox of her success, that in achieving everything she'd worked for, she'd lost connection to the simple pleasures that made life worth living. The revelation had come gradually. Through watching Jack navigate his dual roles with grace, never sacrificing his relationship with Lily despite his expanding responsibilities at WonderTech. Jack's eyes held hers, understanding the admission for what it was. "The coding club meets on Wednesday afternoons," he said. "We could always use another instructor." His invitation carried meaning beyond the simple words, an opening towards something neither was quite ready to name. It offered Sarah not just connection to Jack, but to a world outside the corporate environment that had consumed her identity, a chance to share knowledge with children who might see in her the possibilities they could aspire to. It represented the kind of meaningful engagement that transcended career achievements, the human connection that Jack had prioritized even at great professional cost. As Sarah left that morning, Lily impulsively hugged her, the spontaneous affection of a child who gave trust freely once it was earned. Over the girl's head, Sarah's eyes met Jack's in a moment of shared recognition of how life's most significant turns often come disguised as ordinary days, of how people overlooked can become essential, of how second chances arrive when least expected. Jack stood in the doorway watching Sarah walk to her car, no longer invisible but finally seen, not for who he once was or what he had lost, but for who he had chosen to become. In the autumn light, with his daughter's hand in his, the path forward looked different than he had ever imagined, not a return to his past life, but the beginning of something new, built on the foundations of who he had always been. The story of the janitor who caught the real thief spread throughout WonderTech, evolving from corporate gossip to company legend. Some embellished the details, Others questioned whether Jack had orchestrated the entire scenario to advance himself. But those closest to the situation recognized the deeper truth that Jack's journey reflected systemic blindness to human potential when it appeared in unexpected packages. His experience prompted Sarah to implement new company policies, including flexible work arrangements for parents and a formal program to identify and develop talent at all organizational levels. The changes weren't merely symbolic. They reflected fundamental shifts in how the company valued its people, recognizing that innovation and insight could come from anyone, regardless of title or background. For Jack, the vindication was sweet but secondary to the stability he could now provide for Lily. His new role allowed him to use his technical expertise, while maintaining the work-life balance that had driven his career choices after Emma's death. The wounds of invisibility healed gradually as colleagues who had once looked through him now sought his input and expertise. Yet he kept small reminders of his time as a janitor, the building access card with his old position listed, a cleaning cloth in his desk, drawer, tangible connections to the humility and perspective gained from his years at the bottom of the corporate ladder. Those experiences had taught him to see people others overlooked, to value contributions regardless of title, lessons he now brought to his leadership role. Lily flourished with the stability and expanded opportunities, her natural aptitude for technology, nurtured by both her father and the growing circle of mentors she gained through his new position. Yet she retained the groundedness he had instilled during their leaner times, never developing the sense of entitlement he observed in many executives' children. "Remember when you used to let me help sort the recycling from your cart?" she asked one evening, the memory not traumatic but treasured time spent with her father, learning about sustainability while he worked his second shift. Jack smiled, recognizing that what he had seen as necessity, she had experienced as connection. Their story together had never been defined by his job title but by his presence, his consistency, his unwavering commitment to putting her needs first. The seasons would change, the company would evolve, but what remained constant was the truth revealed in that crisis that sometimes the most valuable people are those we fail to see, that wisdom and talent hide in unexpected places, and that redemption often begins with someone simply being given the chance to be heard. For Jack, the journey from invisibility to recognition hadn't changed who he was at his Korea father, a problem solver, a man of quiet integrity. For Sarah, the lesson had transformed her understanding of leadership and value, teaching her to look beyond titles and appearances to the humanity beneath. And for Lily, watching it all unfold with a child's clear-eyed perception, it was simply confirmation of what she had always known, that her father was a hero, whether he wore a suit or pushed a mop, whether the world recognized it or not.